Rita Hayworth and Glen met by happenstance before either one was famous, but when they were cast as troublemaking lovers in the 1946 film Gilda, they fell deeply in love and began a relationship that endured more than 4 decades. The iconic noir film earned Rita the well-deserved nickname of Hollywood's love goddess, but Glen, who had starred alongside Rita in the film The Lady in Question in 1940, referred to her endearingly as the love of his life. Even though the two young and up-and-coming actors absolutely adored each other, they somehow never managed to make a traditional monogamous relationship work. They never walked down the aisle either, because one or the other was always married to someone else. But regardless, their relationship was still something very special to both of them, and they managed to make it last for decades. Rita was born Margarita Carmen Cansino in Brooklyn, New York. She was married 5 times throughout her life. Most notably, she was married to Prince Ali Salman Aga Khan, singer Dick Haymes, and Orson Welles. Glen, on the other hand, was born in Canada, but his family moved to the States when he was very young. He grew up in Santa Monica. He was married 4 times, most notably to dancer Eleanor Powell, and later to soap opera actress Catherine Hayes. Glen was very much a ladies' man. He was rumored to have hooked up with vixens like Judy Garland, Joan Crawford, Marilyn Monroe, and more, but no one in his life ever made him feel the same way Rita did. An enduring romance. Throughout his many affairs, flings, and hookups, Glen's love for Rita never ceased, and his undying adoration of her showed itself in a variety of eyebrow-raising ways. In 1960, he purchased the lot next to Rita's Beverly Hills home that she shared with her husband, esteemed screenwriter James Hill. Hayworth supposedly was the one who informed Glen the property was available. Perhaps she was trying to give him the hint that she was as well. That's where Glen built his dream home. The very next day, after he finished building that house and moved in, Rita filed for divorce. And just like that, the on-again, off-again couple were back in each other's loving arms. Glen installed a little gate at the rear of his property so Rita could come over to his house whenever she wanted. They spent nearly every waking hour together, soaking in rays, sitting by Glen's pool. Rita told reporters in 1972 Glen was the best neighbor a woman could ask for. It's not surprising considering the emotional attachment that Glen considered Gilda to be his favorite film. It was the film that made him a star. He also said that any film with Rita in it ranked high on his list of favorites. He was quoted in a 1990 documentary about Hayworth that he loved her very deeply at that time. His feelings for the actress never faded, even after she was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's in 1981. Glen helped out as much as he could when she was in the later stages. When she died of the disease in 1987, Glen was among the pallbearers who laid her to rest. He was always very protective of her. He considered her to be one of his closest allies. Losing her must have been one of the hardest things he had to deal with, but a part of her no doubt lived on in his heart and memories. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you give it a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. And stick around to see how Rita Hayworth's troubling childhood created problems she had to contend with for the rest of her life. Hayworth harbored a lot of hidden pain. Even in her younger years, Rita was a gifted dancer and entertainer. She lit up every time she was on stage or on set, and she learned the ropes a lot quicker than most of her contemporaries. Her co-star Fred Astaire once shared how he could show her a routine before lunch and she'd have it down pat after lunch. She had the uncanny ability of figuring such things out even when she was eating. Even though she was highly talented, she showed some signs of dealing with a great deal of internalized trauma. Despite the fact she was married 5 times and romantically connected to figures like Howard Hughes, Kirk Douglas, and David Niven, she found little comfort in her intimate relationships. She once famously said men would go to bed with Gilda and wake up beside her. She experienced a tremendous amount of loneliness, sadness, and emptiness, and the weight of all those emotions weighed her down. But the rest of the world remained oblivious to them. To them, she was a rich and powerful sex symbol. But Rita never saw herself like that. She spent much of her life trying to run away from her problems, but as much as she tried to escape her inner turmoil, it always managed to catch up with her. Orson Welles summed up her life struggles when he said, "All of Rita's life was pain." A lost little girl. Eduardo Cansino, Hayworth's Spanish father, had been a big star in the old vaudeville circuit, performing alongside his sister in an act billed as the Dancing Cansinos. Rita, according to her school principal, was one of the most kind and nurturing girls he'd ever met, but she struggled academically. In 1931, Eduardo decided to revive the Dancing Cansinos and invited his daughter to become his new dancing partner. Hayworth dyed her hair black to make her appear older and more Latin and began performing at the floating casinos off the coast of Southern California. Eduardo drank and gambled away all the dancing Cansino's earnings and routinely sent Rita out to catch a fish for dinner. If she ever dared return without a fish in hand, he'd beat her mercilessly, although he was always meticulously careful not to leave any bruises. But that wasn't all the torment she endured as a child. Hayworth later opened up to Orson Welles and revealed that during this chapter of her life, her father sexually abused her. Eventually, her father moved the family to Chula Vista, a town near the Mexican border, so he and Rita could dance for Hollywood bigwigs like Carl Laemmle Jr. and Joseph Schenck in the swanky nightclubs in Tijuana. While her brothers enjoyed playing with the other kids in the neighborhood, Hayworth never partook in their games, instead preferring to sit alone on the front porch, staring off into the distance. Rita's old neighbor, Loretta Parkin, used to peek into the Cansino's living room to catch a peek of Margarita practicing her dance routine with her abusive father. He'd often yell at her and call her names when she wouldn't follow his instructions to a T, but Rita never talked back. She simply did the routine over and over until he was satisfied. Rita wasn't allowed to go to school. She had no friends, no one to confide in. All she ever did was sit. All day she'd sit silently on the porch until it was once again time to go to Tijuana. Glen also had his fair share of problems. Although he was married several times, he never remained on good terms with his exes. He was a notorious womanizer and had affairs with stars like Ava Gabor, Maria Schell, and Geraldine Brooks. In total, he carried on affairs with 146 actresses. Ford documented his many relationships by recording every phone conversation he had with his celebrity loves and high-profile friends. He collected tapes of conversation with folks like Richard Nixon, Frank Sinatra, John Wayne, and Lucille Ball. Ford first had the recording system installed so he could eavesdrop on his first wife, fearing she'd discover his infidelity and endless trail of lies. She eventually did find out about his philandering and divorced him in 1959. Glen, like Rita, struggled to find lasting love throughout his life, and eventually he turned to the bottle to soothe his troubled mind. He developed such a bad drinking problem it almost killed him. Towards the end of his life, he couldn't walk on his own. He passed away in 2006 at age 90. Now it's time to hear from you. Who is your favorite star from Hollywood's golden age? Audrey Hepburn, Glenn Ford, Bette Davis, or Rita Hayworth? Let us know what you think in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.